The amount of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into delivering a great movie performance is undeniable. But even when working with a great director and a wonderful script, there's no guarantee that an actor's work will fully resonate. There are, however, those occasional instances where actors still manage to deliver impressive performances in movies that, if we're being fully honest, didn't really deserve their efforts. These 10 performances all ended up in bad movies that failed to make a dent with audiences. Even though it's devastatingly obvious that with a stronger overall project, many of these actors may have been in awards consideration for their work. There is no denying that these strong performances were all compromised by the movie they were trapped within. But at least the actors were able to acquit themselves admirably regardless, despite the divisive responses, if we're being generous, to the films themselves. Above all else, these performances are a monument to unfulfilled potential, and the greatness that was clearly trying to tease its way out of a mediocre end product. So I'm Gareth, you are watching What Culture, and here are 10 brilliant performances trapped in terrible movies. Number 10, Natalie Portman, Lucy in the Sky. Noah Hawley, the creator of FX's terrific Fargo series, made his crushingly disappointing directorial debut with a fantastically premised drama about an astronaut called Lucy Kohler, who struggles to readjust to normal life when returning home from a space mission. Touted as a serious Oscar contender prior to its release, Lucy in the Sky ultimately turned out to be a peculiar car crash of a film. An initially intriguing yet baffling collision of half-baked ideas, unconvincing character psychology, and quasi-laughable melodrama. Yeah, it wasn't great. And yet, standing amid the carnage is Natalie Portman, who delivers a performance of such restrained resolve, despite Hawley's pretentious filmmaking, that she very nearly saves the entire damn thing. That's impressive stuff. Clearly, with a stronger script and more assured direction, Portman would have been a contender for the Best Actress Oscar. But instead, everyone was simply left lamenting what never will be. Number 9, Daniel Radcliffe, Guns Akimbo. Action comedy Guns Akimbo is a textbook example of what happens when a filmmaker throws every idea they have at the screen and simply hopes that some of it will stick. Now, the premise is admittedly ripe for a fun, crank-style gonzo thriller. Computer programmer Miles wakes up with guns bolted to both of his hands and is forced to participate in an underground fight club. Yeah, that's pretty mad. Yeah, the tone of Jason Lee Howden's film is so intensely obnoxious and irritating in its relentless desire to appear edgy that it's mostly just a headache to sit through. Between the ramshackle editing, painfully juvenile script, and disappointing action sequences, it's a near total squandering of a promising concept. The only saving grace then is Daniel Radcliffe, who shed yet another layer of his Harry Potter typecasting as he committed fully to the foul-mouthed, endlessly humiliated Miles. To Radcliffe's credit, he continues to pick left field and unexpected roles in his post-Potter career, even if they clearly don't all result in quality movies, as this certainly is not one of them. One can't help but feel that this would actually have been Radcliffe's true answer to Crank, were it assembled with anything approximating filmmaking skill, but instead he's just the bright spot in an otherwise hyperkinetic dud. What a shame. Number 8, Linda Hamilton, Terminator Dark Fate. Terminator fans were understandably thrilled when franchise veteran Linda Hamilton was confirmed to star in Terminator Dark Fate, marking her first major appearance in the sci-fi action series since 1991's T2. And unquestionably, Hamilton's reprisal of Sarah Connor is the single significant reason to actually watch the movie. She painted a compelling picture of grieved anguish as Sarah continued to mourn for her murdered son John, and teamed up with a new generation of heroes to try and stop Skynet, or Legion, from ending the world. But Dark Fate was ultimately a massive swing and a miss for most Terminator fans, a frustratingly generic rehash of the first 2 Terminator movies, which brought desperately little fresh or interesting to the table, beyond the controversial killing of John, of course. Hamilton's steely presence is certainly worthwhile, and provides Sarah with a far more dignified role in the series than her off-screen death in the 3rd film, but like the rest of the cast, she's left wanting for more dramatically inspired material here. Maybe it's time to let the Terminator franchise be, terminated. And with that in mind, I've got a question for you. What franchise do you think needs to end once and for all? Let me know in the comments down below. Number 7. Paul Walter Hauser, Richard Jewell. Though Clint Eastwood's Richard Jewell was broadly praised by most critics, and Kathy Bates ended up with a Best Supporting Actress Oscar nomination, it is ultimately a deeply problematic and misguided film. Shortly following its release, Richard Jewell was slammed for its highly questionable portrayal of reporter Kathy Scruggs. He was shown using sex to obtain information from an FBI agent. This was widely refuted by Scruggs' real-life colleagues, and highlighted the underlying hypocrisy of Eastwood's film in needlessly damaging Scruggs' character, while also condemning those who did the very same to Jewell when he was suspected of being involved in the film's central bombing. To make matters worse, Scruggs died in 2001, and therefore wasn't able to defend herself against the blatantly misleading depiction. In addition to this, Richard Jewell is simply the bad kind of Eastwood film as well. The one where every scene feels like it was the first or second take, and that he simply wanted to get everything in the can as fast as possible. And while Kathy Bates earned the lion's share of the critical acclaim, the best performance in the movie is actually that of Paul Walter Hauser as Jewell. It's a turn so brilliantly and unexpectedly understated that it very nearly holds the entire film aloft. And if anyone had any business being nominated for major awards, it was clearly him. Though the Academy clearly doesn't care much for a film's purported authenticity. I mean, just look at how they tripped over themselves to nominate Bohemian Rhapsody. Beyond Hauser's sublime work, Richard Jewell is an agonizingly simplistic rendition of a fascinating story. Number 6. Sarah Paulson, The Goldfinch. John Crowley's The Goldfinch was probably the most unexpected Oscar bait dud of 2019. With an acclaimed filmmaker, Pulitzer Prize-winning source material, and a killer cast, it really did have all the makings of a ferocious Best Picture contender. But as it turned out, the movie was an almost unbearably overlong 149-minute misfire, a pretentious mishmash of overwrought melodrama and unearned tonal shifts, led by a thoroughly miscast Ansel Elgort as protagonist Theo. Though the cast was clearly straining to elevate Oscar nominee Peter Straughn's script, there's only really one performance which manages to truly transcend the stodgy, dull-as-dishwater filmmaking. Sarah Paulson has a small but memorable supporting role as Xandra, the cocktail waitress girlfriend of Theo's father, and she is easily the most energetic and entertaining presence in the entire film, playing massively against type with her spray tan, hair extensions, and tacky attire. Paulson brings the much-needed levity in a movie that otherwise takes itself deathly seriously. Though she only appears intermittently throughout the outrageously bloated runtime, Paulson's performance is unquestionably the most self-aware and expertly calibrated of the huge ensemble. If you are enjoying this list, my friend, then hit that subscribe button down below and you will get more of these What Culture videos each and every day. Number 5. Ken Watanabe, Godzilla King of the Monsters. Godzilla King of the Monsters was perhaps the most disappointing blockbuster of 2019. Yeah, that's a year that had Star Wars Rise of Skywalker in it as well. Despite promising a greater focus on the titular monsters, the film nevertheless fell into the typical trap of lingering on the underwritten human characters the audience cared nothing for. Yay! There's perhaps one single exception though, and that's the returning Dr. Ishiro Serizawa, who again brings a quiet, controlled dignity to the film, while generally being surrounded by characters either stupid, irritating, or both. Of all the humans in the film, Serizawa has the most interesting relationship with Godzilla, clearly respecting his place in the world, and in a scene almost brilliant enough to be genuinely touching, ultimately sacrificing himself in order to resurrect the fallen creature. Honestly, it is a shame that Serizawa wasn't the straight-up protagonist of these movies, because he was by far the most interesting and likable of all the humans in these films. Ken Watanabe absolutely knocked the role out of the park, despite everything stupefying going on around him. What a guy. Number 4. Cynthia Erivo, Harriet. 2019's Harriet Tubman biopic is practically the definition of Oscar bait. A well-meaning yet soullessly bland film about an important subject. Between Casey Lemon's totally flat direction worthy of a basic cable TV special, the patronizingly simplistic script, and Terence Blanchard's hilariously over-egged musical score, Harriet is a far cry from the awards-worthy historical drama most were hoping for, eh? And yet Cynthia Erivo's performance as Tubman is quite exemplary, all things considered. Though her eventual Best Actress Oscar nomination raised more than a few eyebrows, there is no doubting that with a stronger film surrounding her, she absolutely would have been entirely worthy. As it stands, Erivo absolutely gives it her all and slinks effortlessly into the role. She smashed it. Yet the totally beige, generic biopic formula consistently undermined her otherwise remarkable work. Number 3, Lawrence Fishburne, Running with the Devil. Now, don't feel bad if you haven't heard of Running with the Devil. It's one of Nicolas Cage's many straight-to-video action thrillers from back before his big ol' comeback, and typically is, for the most part, a totally forgettable, run-of-the-mill genre offering. But in a surprising twist of fate, Cage shares the screen with the brilliant Lawrence Fishburne. And in an even more unexpected turn, Fishburne delivers a deliciously balmy performance that makes Cage's seem positively meek and restrained. I'm as shocked as you are. Fishburne appears intermittently throughout the film as a coke-snorting, hooker-banging drug dealer, and rather than simply showing his face on set for a few days to make a quick buck, he fully gives himself over to the insanity of it all. Between his larger-than-life line readings and willingness to indulge his character's hornier instincts, he injects the otherwise staid VOD thriller with just the unpredictable energy you'd have reasonably expected his co-star to deliver. Though few will view it as a career highlight for the legendary actor, it's a performance from a man who knows exactly what he's starring in, and he has the good sense to crank the insanity up to 11. Marvelous. Number 2, Kristen Stewart, Charlie's Angels, and Seberg. Kristen Stewart has emerged as one of the most consistently impressive actresses of her generation since the Twilight franchise came to an end, though both of her notable performances back in That Year Again 2019 were sadly squandered on otherwise bad movies. First, we have Charlie's Angels, a thrown-together attempt to reboot the classic IP without anything close to a worthwhile vision or even basic charm. The single standout, however, was Stewart, who played rather against type as the rebellious angel Sabina Wilson. Her clear enthusiasm for the project is massively infectious, yet the action sequences are absolutely headache-inducing and the plot is completely forgettable, even for the standards of a Charlie's Angels movie. Then there's Seberg, the biopic of legendary actress Jean Seberg. Now, Stewart was perfectly cast in the role and absolutely delivered a sharply convincing portrayal. Yet the film around her was, like the aforementioned Harriet, an exhaustingly generic dramatization of a fascinating real-life story. In each case, Stewart's go-for-broke performance just needed greater dramatic meat and directorial skill to support it. But she didn't get that, sadly. Number 1, Betty Gilpin, Coffee and Kareem. The Netflix original buddy cop comedy Coffee and Kareem is not good, to be kind. Despite Ed Helms being perfectly cast as a bumbling cop who stumbles upon corruption within his department, it's ultimately an awkward and mostly unfunny stab at a thoroughly played out genre. There is an easy standout though, and that is Betty Gilpin, who proved herself to be the single redeeming feature of this schlocky action comedy. Gilpin plays the ineffably arrogant detective Linda Watts, who, spoiler alert, turns out to be a corrupt cop. Mercifully, much of the third act is centered around her scene-stealing, scenery-chewing, sexy, scary performance, while most of the movie's crude one-liners resolutely fall flat. The unpredictable energy of Gilpin's performance results in pretty much Coffee and Kareem's single source of both humor and general entertainment value. She knew precisely what the film needed to be, even if nobody else here was really pulling their weight. Now continue your YouTube journey with us here at What Culture by clicking on another video right here. Bye bye.